In a post-apocalyptic future, a group of rebels is trying to defeat a company called Wicked, which has been experimenting on children to find the cure for a deadly virus. When a train with Wicked cargo and prisoners appears on the tracks, two rebel cars start following it. Jorge and Brenda are on one side while Thomas and Vince are on the other. As a distraction, Brenda shoots at the train drivers, who immediately call for backup. Then a few guards come out to open fire, so Jorge has to drive while shooting back. Vince puts his car close enough to the back of the train for Thomas to place a hook and jump aboard. When Vince tries to follow him, a tire goes off and the car starts losing distance, so Vince has to jump before the hook goes off too and the car crashes. At that moment a Wicked aircraft appears and opens fire, so Jorge and Brenda have to drive away to avoid getting killed. Thomas and Vince begin running on top of the train and see a bunch of soldiers coming after them. The duo jumps down and Vince sets up an explosive while Thomas shoots at the guards. When the dynamite explodes, it throws the soldiers back and separates the last few cars from the rest of the train. Meanwhile the aircraft is still chasing after Jorge and Brenda, who stop the car to pretend to surrender. When the soldiers leave the aircraft to arrest them, they fall into a trap in the ground and a bunch of rebels come out of hiding to surround them. The pilot is also blocked so now the rebels can steal the aircraft. Back at the train, more rebels come out of hiding and Newt starts working on separating the car from the main train structure. The Wicked soldiers are coming for them with open fire so Thomas and his friends have to concentrate on shooting back. At that moment the aircraft shows up and lowers a hook that they connect to the top of the train car. The group rushes to climb on it too and Vince makes a last-minute jump not to be left behind. Moments later the aircraft drops the car at the rebels' hideout and all the prisoners are freed, but Thomas is disappointed to notice that his friend Minho isn't among them. Vince gives a speech for the newbies, explaining Wicked wanted them because they're immune to the virus and their brain juice could be made into a cure. However, the rebels don't approve of child experimentation so they're fixing a big ship to escape the mainland. Thomas asks a rescued boy if he heard any important information while he was captured. Apparently the train was heading toward a city, which is strange because there aren't supposed to be any cities left. Jorge confirms he was there a few years ago and it's called the Last City. That's where Wicked has the main base of operations, so attacking it is impossible. Thomas still wants to go and save his friend, but Vince refuses to put the rebels through such dangers. At that moment they hear pilots on the radio, so the rebels rush to turn off the power and hide. Soon Wicked aircraft begin searching the area and find nothing, but they're getting too close to the hideout so they need to leave soon. That night while everyone is asleep, Thomas tries to sneak out to go save Minho alone. However, Newt and Frypan find him and announce they're coming too. Meanwhile Minho is shocked to wake up in the glade where he used to live during the experiment. He sees a few boys in the distance but they won't answer when he yells. Then he sees another boy run and follows him into a hut, only to appear in a mysterious corridor. A door opens and a monster known as Griever comes out, so Minho has to start running. This place is a maze and he keeps finding blocked passages. Voices can be heard discussing his performance, and sometimes Minho has visions of a doctor checking on him. Suddenly his body freezes, but he pushes through the strange force and his body ends up against the ceiling. The Griever traps him under its claws and roars at him as Minho screams. At that moment it's revealed Minho is actually in a lab and going through a simulation against his will so the Wicked scientists can extract his blood. Sometime later Thomas's team has to cross a very dark tunnel. They find a zombie-like creature known as Crank and stop to think how to avoid it, but then a bunch of cranks surround the car and start pounding on the doors. The boys speed up as a crank jumps on the front window to start punching it, so Frypan drives close to another vehicle to push the crank off. Unfortunately this causes them to crash and the car flips over. Thankfully Thomas can break a window to get out and his friends manage to open the door. There's a crank coming after them so Frypan rushes to shoot the creature down. There's a horde of cranks coming so the boys start running, only to discover that the exit is blocked by cranks as well. Frypan shoots as many as he can but soon he's out of bullets. At that moment a car runs over the creatures, revealing that Jorge and Brenda have come to the rescue. While Brenda shoots a few cranks down, the boys get in the car and Jorge takes off, so they manage to leave the tunnel safely. When they reach the road, they see the last city in the distance and Jorge notices Wicked has built a massive wall around it. In the meantime, Wicked's leader Ava meets with the board members because citizens are losing hope for a cure, not to mention the new wall makes them wary. Ava tells them she's been getting a serum from Minho and the cure should be done soon, but the board members are tired of the excuse and want to use the money to build safe zones. The conversation is interrupted by Teresa, the girl who betrayed Thomas in favor of Wicked. She gives a speech about hope and sacrifice that convinces the board members to keep paying for the experiments. Back to Thomas's group, they make it to the slums outside the wall, where protesters are demanding help from the city. Thomas is unaware that the tattoo on his neck is glowing and sends his location to Wicked. The group hides among the crowd to reach the entrance of the city, where the guards activate the turrets. The crowd immediately runs away as the bullets cause several explosions and kill hundreds of people. Thomas's team tries to return to their car, but they're surrounded by masked men who immediately capture and take them away in vans. When they arrive at these mysterious people's hideout, Jorge begins beating a masked man up and doesn't stop until he sees Brenda is fine. A guy removes his mask and reveals to be Gally, who tried to stop the boys in the past and was supposed to be dead. Thomas jumps on him to punch him, but Newt pulls him back and convinces him to listen. Gally explains he's on their side now and says he can get them through the wall. There's a group of rebels here too that is trying to get the city back from Wicked. Gally introduces them to the leader Lawrence, whose face has been disfigured by the virus. He keeps N4 with serum connected to his arm 24/7 to avoid becoming a crank. Lawrence offers Thomas a way to sneak into the city on the condition that he helps him in return. Thomas agrees, so he and Newt will get to travel with Gally through the sewers while the others must stay behind as insurance. Before they leave, Newt notices that his hands are shaking. By nighttime, the boys finally leave the sewers and make it inside the city. Gally notices they've upped security, which means Wicked knows the rebels are around. Then they go to a secret spot in the wall where Gally's group has been watching the Wicked building for years, but they haven't found a way in because there are soldiers, scanners, and surveillance everywhere. Gally also shows them that Teresa is working there and believes she's their way in. The trio goes back to the hideout to discuss the situation. The group has no issues with using Teresa after all she did to them, but Thomas doesn't like the idea. Newt gets angry and pushes Thomas against the wall as he blames Thomas's hesitation on his love for Teresa. When he realizes he's snapped, he apologizes and leaves the room. Thomas follows him and Newt finally admits he's infected before convincing his friend to agree to use Teresa. Meanwhile in the lab, Teresa injects an infected girl with the serum made of Minho's blood and immediately cures her. An excited Teresa goes to see Minho to give him the big news, but he doesn't react at all. When Teresa is about to leave, Minho attacks her and begins insulting her for betraying her friends, blaming her for several deaths. Soon guards come in to sedate him, but he manages to steal a metal hairpin before going down. Another scientist takes Teresa back to the lab, where she learns the serum has failed and the girl is now a violent crank. That night Teresa is taking a walk when she notices Thomas in the crowd. She immediately follows him to an empty alley where Thomas asks her if she regrets it. Teresa admits that sometimes she does, but she'd do it again. Then Gally appears behind her to capture her. Moments later they're in an old church for interrogation. Teresa tells the group that Minho is in sublevel 3 with 28 more prisoners, and the only way to get there is with an authorized fingerprint. Gally thinks they should just cut her finger and get rid of her, but Thomas stops her and forces Teresa to remove the Wicked trackers that all the boys have in their necks. While Teresa is working, she notices that Brenda looks very healthy for an infected person and guesses Thomas has been giving her regular injections of his immune blood. However, Thomas says he only did so once months ago when they first learned about it. Teresa thinks that's impossible and Brenda should have turned by now, but Thomas refuses to talk about it. Before Gally takes her away, Teresa steals a piece of gauze with Thomas's blood. Afterward the boys dress as Wicked soldiers and enter the facility with Teresa, whose presence allows them to avoid suspicion. When they make it to the stairwell, Gally begins working on installing a jamming device into the electrical box. While they wait, Newt begins coughing and Teresa realizes he's infected. Once the device is done, Lawrence's men manage to hack into the city's security system. Then the group rushes to sublevel 3, where they quickly bring down all the guards in the room. Now they can free all the prisoners from their cells, but Thomas notices Minho is missing. Teresa checks the computer and discovers Minho was taken to the lab on the other side of the building. He's so weak that this harvesting session may kill him. Newt and Thomas force Teresa to take them there while Gally stays back to try to break open the door guarding the serum. When the trio gets in the elevator, they're joined by Ava's right-hand Jansen. Thankfully he only chit-chats with Teresa, telling her that Thomas was seen outside the city. However, after the trio leaves the elevator, Teresa begins arguing with the boys and Thomas takes off his mask at the same time Jansen comes after them. Soon more guards arrive and Thomas tries to take Teresa hostage, only for her to push him and Newt behind a bulletproof door. While the boys run off, Teresa tells Jansen she did it to trap them and reminds him that she needs them alive. Alarms begin wailing in the whole building while Jansen calls for more security. In the sublevel, Gally finally retrieves the serum and begins moving with all the kids. They manage to reach the garage where Brenda has stolen a bus, but she notices Thomas and Newt aren't back yet. Gally asks her to wait on the bus to protect the children while he goes back for the others. However, a bunch of soldiers soon reach the garage and Brenda has no choice but to take off. On the upper floors, Thomas and Newt run into Ava, but before Thomas can shoot her they're found by Jansen and his men. The boys immediately start running, shooting any guard that gets in their way while looking for their friend. In the lab, Minho hears the yelling and uses a hair clip to stab a scientist. Then he quickly knocks down a guard and injects another scientist with a sedative. In the corridor, Newt and Thomas keep on fighting the soldiers but they're almost out of bullets. Newt throws a grenade to bring the remaining guards down, however one more man appears to block their exit. Suddenly the guy is tackled by Minho, who throws him through a window with a scream before reuniting with his friends. More soldiers are coming so the three boys start running again. Jansen and his men block another corridor so the trio hides in a room with a very thick metal door. The guards bring a saw to start cutting the door, so the teens have no choice but to break the window and jump into the pool below. The jump goes well and they land safely, but when they get out of the pool more soldiers surround them. Suddenly one of the men shoots his teammates before taking off his mask, revealing to be Gally. On the street, Brenda is doing her best to drive the bus as fast as possible while pushing one of the wicked cars that follows her. She manages to make it crash against a signpost, but there are still more vehicles coming after her. Eventually she turns around a corner and finds the whole street blocked by the enemy. Brenda gets off the bus and shoots a flare that is seen by Frypan, who has been waiting all this time inside a crane. He drops a crane hook in the middle of the street and Brenda connects it to the bus before rushing back in. Then Frypan uses the crane to lift the bus, which hits a few buildings before it's pushed over the wall. The weight causes the bus bumper to start breaking, so Frypan extends the chain to make the fall shorter. The bus lands on the ground standing up and falls again in seconds, but thankfully nobody gets hurt. Meanwhile Teresa is using the stolen gauze to analyze Thomas's blood in the lab and discovers his blood carries the true cure. It doesn't only hold back the virus, it actually destroys it. She shows this to Ava, telling her they need to find Thomas. Brenda and Frypan take all the kids to the hideout only to find it empty. It turns out Lawrence has gone out to gather all the people in the slums, announcing tonight they're taking the city back. With Lawrence at the front on a truck full of explosives, the crowd begins running toward the city entrance. The security team tries to activate the turrets, but the rebels' hacking has disabled all their systems. The guards on the wall open fire manually, but it isn't enough to stop Lawrence, who makes his vehicle crash against the entrance. A massive explosion happens, creating a huge hole in the wall that allows the crowd to burst into the city. Thomas's team continues to sneak around while helping Newt move since his sickness is getting worse. They hide when they see the police take the streets to fight the invaders, but explosions are going off in every corner so they need to get out fast. Next they hide inside a building and Thomas calls Brenda to tell her to leave without them, but Brenda refuses. At that moment Jorge shows up in a stolen aircraft with Vince to rescue all the kids and Brenda asks them to save Thomas too. The boys see the aircraft as well and start moving toward the meeting spot. However, Newt can barely move anymore, so Thomas tells Minho and Gally to leave with the serum while he stays with his friend. Newt gives Thomas a necklace and asks him to leave him, but Thomas refuses and starts carrying him. As Newt finally passes out, Teresa broadcasts her voice over the whole city. She explains that Thomas's blood can truly heal infected people and they could save Newt, so she asks him to come back. At the same time Minho and Gally make it to the aircraft. While Thomas wonders what to do, Newt wakes up as a crank and attacks Thomas. The boys start fighting and roll on the ground while Newt asks his friend to end things. Thomas refuses to kill him and keeps on fighting him, hoping to buy time. Newt apologizes and grabs his gun to do it himself, but Thomas immediately knocks it off his hand. Then Newt loses his last traces of sanity and grabs a knife to try to stab Thomas, but he only manages to hurt him a little before Thomas kicks him off. When Newt attacks again, the boys crash and Thomas has no choice but to push the knife against Newt, killing him. While Thomas cries for his friend, the others arrive with the serum, but obviously it's too late. Instead of leaving with the team, a furious Thomas goes back to the Wicked building and finds Ava, who tells him she can save them all. Thomas drops his gun and volunteers his body to develop the cure after getting Ava to promise she'll leave the other kids alone. At that moment Ava is shot dead by Jansen, who then sedates Thomas. Moments later Thomas wakes up tied to a stretcher in a lab where Teresa is taking a sample of his blood to make serum. Jansen explains that the cure will only be given to the elite before revealing he's infected. When he's about to inject himself with the new serum, Teresa breaks a bottle on his head to knock him down. Then she frees Thomas, only for Jansen to grab her and throw her across the room. He starts fighting her for the serum, even hitting her head on the table. Thomas tackles Jansen through the window and they start fighting in the corridor. Jansen almost overpowers him, but Thomas refuses to surrender and they keep going. Eventually Jansen takes out a gun and threatens to shoot both teens, but at that moment the rebels hit the building with rockets, knocking Jason down and allowing the duo to run. They hide in a lab containing some cranks in a cell and Teresa is horrified to discover Thomas was severely wounded by the explosion. Jansen comes looking for them, so Teresa distracts him while Thomas throws an object at the cell door, breaking it. The cranks jump out and start feeding on Jansen, allowing the teens to run away. Teresa helps Thomas move and they make it to the roof where they discover the building is slowly burning down. Thinking it's over, Teresa apologizes for everything and they share a kiss. Then the rebels arrive in the aircraft, but they can't get too close because of the fire. As the neighbor building collapses and the aircraft keeps on shaking, Teresa throws Tomas at the team, who catches him just in time. Teresa doesn't follow him and dies as the building collapses under her. Thomas cries for her before passing out. Sometime later all the survivors have used the repaired ship to make it to a safe island where they start building a new home. Thomas recovers from his injury and checks Newt's necklace to discover a letter thanking him for everything and asking him to take care of everyone. On this new home, the survivors carve the names of the fallen fighters on a big rock like they used to do back in the maze experiment. After adding Teresa's name, Thomas looks at the beach while revealing he has a sample of the serum. Make sure to subscribe our channel Cinema-Fathom and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.